Good morning. Mr. Herman here with our 5.2 quadratic formula notes. So we are going to go ahead and look at a way of solving for our solutions of a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. We're going to learn several different methods today, or not today, but in our unit. But our first one here we're going to look at is quadratic formula. So first off, we're going to look at standard form. That's going to be real important as we're working through our notes here, is that we are in standard form. And so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So reminding ourselves, standard form, we have A, B, and C. We call those coefficients. Okay, so those are numbers that are in front of variables, okay, or constants. A and B are coefficients. C is going to be called a constant here, okay? Now we have to identify A, B, and C. Now the thing we have to be careful with is that our equation must equal 0, and we'll write that down later on in our notes here, okay? But it has to equal 0. So if we're looking through here, we have x squared plus 3x plus 9 equals 0. The number in front of x squared, if we don't see a number, that number is going to be 1. The number in front of x is 3. The number in front of by itself is 9. Okay? For the second one, 4x squared plus 8x plus 16. 4 is in front of the x squared, that's our A. 8's in front of the x, that's our B. And the number by itself is 16. Now we're good since it equals 0. If it didn't equal 0, we'd have a problem. Now our last one here, we have 6x squared plus 3 equals 0. So in front of the x squared, we have 6. Now we don't have any x's, which means the number in front of x is 0. Okay? And then C is going to be 3. Now, before we start solving for quadratics, we're going to talk about something first. So when solving quadratics, we can tell if the solution will be real or complex by looking at the discriminant. Okay, that's a new word that we're going to use here. It's part of the quadratic formula, so we're not going to have to do too much extra work here. So the discriminant is defined by the square root of b squared minus 4ac and is a component of the quadratic formula. So we'll see that in just a couple minutes when we get to the quadratic formula. So a quadratic equation will have one real solution when the discriminant is 0. So if we think back to inspection, we had x squared equals 0. That's the one time that we'll have one solution. We'll see those situations, those unique cases when there's just one solution or one real solution. And that's going to be when our discriminant is 0. We'll have two real solutions when the discriminant is positive. Okay, because think we're taking our square root. Inside the square root, we want it to be positive for real solutions. And if it's complex solutions, that means inside the square root, the discriminant is negative. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and find the discriminant and tell how many solutions the expression will have and if they will be real or complex. Okay? So let's go ahead and go through these three equations here. So let's start off with our first one. We have x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. Now, whenever we're doing quadratic formula, just like we did before, we always want to identify A, B, and C. Okay? So our number in front of x squared is 1. Our number in front of x is negative 6. Now, we need to be careful. Whenever there's a coefficient, if there's a negative or a minus in front of it, it has to stay with it. Okay? Because if it's plus or positive, we don't need to show that extra part. But if it's negative or minus, we do need to show that it is going to be negative. And then C is going to be 3. Okay? Now, I'm going to make a square root here. Now let's look at our discriminant real quick. We have b squared minus 4ac. So there's b is negative 6. I'm going to always put it in parentheses when I'm plugging in. Negative 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 3. Now I'm going to put that in my calculator. Okay, let me see. So my calculator, I have parentheses. I'm going to not do the square root yet. Negative 6 parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses 1 parentheses 3 parentheses. Okay, so that's the inside of my square root right there. Hit enter. Okay, it's 24. So now I'm going to write this as square root 24. So let's look at our little table here. My discriminant, is it 0? No. Is it positive? Yeah. Okay, it's positive inside my square root. So I will have 2 real solutions. All right, so let's go on to the second one here. So we've got 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. Our number in front of x squared is 2. Our number in front of x is 4. Our number by itself is 2. Let's do our formula again. So we have b squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 2. Okay, I'm going to pop that in my calculator here, including my parentheses. Minus 4 times 2 times 2. Let's see what we get. Oh, we got 0. So I got the square root of 0, which is 0. So I'm going to have 1 real solution, because our table says if the determinant is 0, 1 real solution. And now let's work on our last one here. So we have 4x squared plus 8x plus 5 equals 0. My number coefficient of x squared is a, which is 4. In front of x, the b is 8. And the number by itself is just 5. Let's do this here. So we have b squared, so 8 squared minus 4 times 4 times 5. I'm going to put that in my calculator. Parentheses 8 parentheses squared minus 4 parentheses 4 parentheses 5 negative 16. Okay, my discriminant is negative inside the square root. Okay, so I know that is going to be 2 complex solutions. Okay, because it's negative inside the square root. Okay, that negative tells me complex solutions. All right, so now let's go ahead and go a bit further, and we know how many solutions there are, but let's figure out what those solutions are actually going to be. So we're going to use the quadratic formula. In order to solve a quadratic equation, mathematicians use the quadratic formula. Which was published by René Descartes in 1961. In order to use the quadratic formula, the equation must be in standard form and equal 0. If not both of those are true, we have to rearrange it to be in standard form and equal 0. So this is the quadratic formula. Okay, it's pretty complicated, but you're going to always be given this on a test, on a quiz, on the EOC. I will give you the quadratic formula. Okay, notice how we see this part right here. Here's our discriminant that we saw on the other side of our notes. Okay, now this plus or minus, positive, negative, think about it when we did inspection. We always took square root. We had to have positive and negative. That just means that there can be 2 solutions. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and solve 2 equations with the quadratic formula. So are we in standard form? Ax squared plus bx plus c. Yes. Does it equal 0? Equal 0. Yes. So we're good to go. So let's go ahead and identify a, b, and c. Now I'm going to plug into my equation. Once again, I'm going to use parentheses. So I know b is 8, so negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now I'm going to simplify in 3 places. I'm going to simplify here if I need to. So negative times 8, this becomes negative 8. Plus or minus inside my square root. I'm going to simplify that. I know from the discriminant on the other side, it's negative 16. And then my denominator. 2 times 4 is 8. Okay? And we're not quite done. We're going to do 2 more things. X equals negative 8 plus or minus. Now I know square root negative 16 from our complex numbers we talked about. It's going to be 4i. Okay, and now I'm going to divide. So I have x equals, the 8's going to go both to the negative 8 and to the 4i. So I'm going to have negative 8 over 8 plus or minus 4i over 8. And I'll finish it off with x equals negative 1 plus or minus 0.5i. Now there's 2 solutions here, negative 1 plus 0.5i and negative 1 minus 0.5i. Okay, let's do one more together before we get some practice in on our own. All right, so are we in standard form? X squared minus 6x equals negative 5. Kind of. Does it equal 0 though? It does not. So we got to make sure we rearrange first. So x squared minus 6x equals negative 5. To make it equal 0, we need to add 5 on both sides. We have x squared minus 6x plus 5. So if we don't see a number in front of x squared, that means that our a value is 1. B in front of x, we got to keep that negative, keep that minus symbol, and then positive 5 for c. Let's plug in what we know. So when you solve a problem like this, you always need to plug in first. Okay, I want to see this first now. This is why we use parentheses, because we have negative 6 for b. Square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Now we'll simplify here, here, and here. Negative times a negative gives us a positive, plus or minus a square root. Let's see, that's going to give us negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. Whoops. There we go. Positive 16. Over 2. Let's simplify our square root. So square root 16, if we use our green chart, we see it's 4. All right, now here, I'll do 2 things. I'll do my fractions. That's 3 plus or minus 2. So now I need to break down these 2 solutions. Okay, now I have x equals 3 plus 2, and I have x equals 3 minus 2. That's what this plus or minus means. So I'm going to have 5 here as one solution, and 1 as another solution. So I can have 5, 0, and 1, 0 as my solutions. Okay, so there's a lot to do here, but it will always work every single time if we're in standard form. All right, so let's finish up answering the puzzle questions. Make sure to work on that practice and exit ticket.